Okay, guys, welcome back. I want to say thank you for watching our last video, and if you're joining us tonight, again, we want to thank you for joining us. We're talking about a really great subject, one that I am just always willing and able to talk about at any time. We're talking about the subject of discipleship. This is a great subject to talk about. It's not one that gets talked about often, and so again, I've invited some people with me to join me. I've got my two daughters here, Riel and Ariana, and they're here because they have been, in some senses, discipled, not just by me and by their mom. And if you hear the disembodied voice again, that's my wife Lacey, who's watching everything over there. But they have also been discipled by some other godly women through events that they've gone through, like Future Teacher Training Camp and those kinds of things. And so they have some people that have invested into them in some of those ways. I also have with me Andrew Boyle and Josh Barber, and these are two young men that I have invested in and try to take under my wing just a little bit to help them grow. And so I wanted them here to help bring some insight to this discussion, because I think it's a discussion that needs to take place, especially concerning the younger generation and what's coming and for the future of the church. I don't know if you guys have paid much attention to things, but the state of the church seems to be in decline. And a lot of times people offer a lot of reasons as to why, well, people just aren't interested anymore, or it's this secular world that we live in, or whatever other kinds of reasons that people give. But here's the real truth. The church has always existed in an ungodly world. Go back to the first century and you look at the Roman culture, it was not a God-centered culture. All right, and the church not only survived, but it thrived in that kind of a culture. And so, if the church is in a state of decline, we can't really blame it on the culture. It's got nothing to do with the culture. I think the problem is within our church culture, not the societal culture that we live in. And so, I want us to talk a little bit along that lines tonight. I had a couple questions that I wanted us to discuss for tonight. And so we're going to talk about those two questions. One of them is, and I wanted to kick this off with asking this question about the need for discipleship. What do you guys think about the need for discipleship in the church today?
Well, I think one of the big things that a lot of times people talk about when they say discipleship, one of the big terms that gets thrown about that I've heard a lot is like shallow Christians, where a lot of people use discipleship as sort of the contrast to evangelism, where you're going out and telling people, whereas discipleship is like taking care of those that are already in the church that aren't strong enough. I don't personally necessarily agree with that. Yes, you disciple those who are immature Christians who don't know that much, but also discipleship is there to give us the bond as Christians. It's to give us that accountability that we talked about in the last class.
Yeah.
The accountability with each other and the relationship with each other, to be able to help each other grow, to be able to call each other out when we need to be called out, to look back at our mistakes honestly, and to be able to learn from those and build upon ourselves based upon those mistakes, and to be able to grow in that kind of a fashion. And so I think discipleship a lot of times comes down to the relationship.
Okay.
And the relationship is just a big thing about why we need that discipleship.
Okay, good.
Well, so I'll play on that. My thing that I wanted to look at a bit is, what is our example of discipleship in the early church? And so you have basically the entirety of the early church is discipleship. You have Jesus and his apostles, his disciples, and that was the pre to the church. And then you have the apostles who then made disciples of their own. You have Paul, who made disciples like Timothy and Titus. And to play on the relationship side of that, they then go to be his companions and his ministry partners. Is that, okay, yes, they were still his disciples in a sense, but they also became those that were then discipling others and were working alongside Paul, encouraging him. So you see that dynamic, which is different than just teaching people. But I think the idea of discipleship has been lost because we have tried to make the church a corporate business.
Okay. All right.
I know that word is shunned in church because we hate the term advertising. But really what we have done is we have taken a lot of the personal side of the church away, and we have given responsibility to a few in a corporate manner, where you have an eldership that make all the leadership decisions. You have the preacher who, if you're in a good body, will listen to the elders, but I've even seen some where legitimately the preacher is the only one making doctrinal calls. That's it. But even within that, if you're listening to the eldership and then you have the preacher underneath who is then doing the teaching, he's still pretty much doing the majority of the teaching, and you have the eldership. So you have what, maybe like 5 people,
Right.
controlling a body of however many you have. It's not nearly as personal as the discipleship that we see in the early church and the growth. And now, of course, you have Paul and the example of him teaching to many people at once. I think that's different. I think teaching and discipleship are different subjects, but they play closely together with each other.
All right.
I would really agree with Josh. I think that, like you were saying, we have lost a lot of the personal things that the New Testament church had. Because if you look in Paul's letters, I mean, he went and traveled lots of places with lots of churches and established new churches and made new Christians. Yet he's able to list them, I mean, not all of them, but he's able to list people by name in his letters, that this is where
There
they're
you
at. They're going here. He kept in touch with these people. He knew how they were doing. He knew what they needed. He knew them by name. And a lot of times for us, we know each other at the church building.
Right.
We know that everyone's doing fine and we're all good and we're happy to be here on Sunday to worship God, but we don't talk to each other during the week. We don't know what each other is struggling with, so we can't have that discipleship relationship. And I think if we're not careful, we have to be even more aware of the need of discipleship today because of that. We've made it a lot easier for us all to congregate into one place to study God's Word, but we've lost that personal connection like the New Testament church had whenever they would go to each other's homes to study.
Okay, good.
I'm gonna play on that. I think the convenience is kind of coming back to bite us because everything is pretty convenient. We don't have any laws against our worship services. We have a building where we can go, and we meet several times a week. We have food. We partake in meals at the church building, and I think we've become too comfortable, and
Okay.
so we're not being as diligent to keep us on the same track that the first century church was on.
Yeah, and I will agree with that. Okay, so let me ask this, because this is something, okay, so I don't know if you guys have done any study on this, but when you talk about the generations that go through the church, I am at the tip of the beginning of the millennial generation. These guys are all kind of Generation Z, the up-and-coming generation that's coming up. And when the research shows this, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, the research shows that a lot of emphasis is placed on the idea of relationships and transparency and the authenticity of the church. When you guys are looking, is that what you're looking for? Because when you look across the board, statistically speaking, that's what they say they're looking for. I know for me it's true. Like, if I don't feel a real relationship at a church, I'm done. Like, we can call it good. I'm not going to come and play church. I'm going to go somewhere else where I can find people that want to work, that want to be busy, that want to serve the Lord, that want to be real with their faith. If we don't want to do that, then let's not call ourselves the church, because we're not being the church. That's the way I feel. I don't know what do you guys feel? What do you guys think?
I think that part of that is, like I was saying, we're too comfortable, so we know what the church teaches, but we don't know why. We kind of have that come and go as I need it, as I please relationship, as opposed to a true relationship with each other and even with God sometimes if we're not careful. And so people don't have their own faith. They don't have like that personal connection with God that helps us have a personal connection with each other. because I was watching Ms. Aaron Sprous's Come Fill Your Cup lesson yesterday with my mom, and she was like, my best friends and I, we have nothing in common except Jesus. That's how we met. That's how we became such great friends. And so if we have that personal connection with God, then we can have our personal connection with each other. And I think that kind of shows more of a need for discipleship than we realize, is the fact that there's a lot of congregations out there that are the same ad.
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say I can totally agree with that. With what you were talking about, seeing that relationship in the churches, I have to say we have traveled a lot, and we've been very blessed. There was one congregation that we could no longer go to because we had a really bad experience there, and yet we still had a bunch of friends from there who kept in touch with us. One of them came to visit us a few years ago because she was getting married and she wanted to come see us before she got married.
That's awesome.
So it's like even then you can still have that relationship. There are lots of churches. One time we were in Arizona, and we were going to our grandparents' house, and we stopped by on a Sunday morning to worship. And my little brother Alec was still praying for his Bible class teacher months later because she was having health issues, and he wanted to make sure she was okay because he thought she was just the greatest in the world. And we were at like almost all the churches that we've gone to, we were like the last people there because everybody wanted to talk to us, and they always. So I've been very blessed to have that relationship at almost every church we've gone to, where everybody wants to talk, everybody wants to be your friend, they want to help you because you have Jesus in common.
Mm-hmm.
And where like it's just that like personal bond where even though you've never met before, you feel like family.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Just a couple thoughts on building off of what you guys said. So I'm gonna kind of get personal for you, real. Okay. All right. So you came back from being in Henderson, Tennessee, that area, going to college over that way. How easy was it to find a place to worship?
It was, depends on how I look at it.
Okay, so I want you to dive into that just a little bit,
Yeah,
because
I was planning on it.
there were not a shortage of church buildings and groups of people worshiping, right? There wasn't a problem to find a location, but what?
But it was hard to find people because everyone already kind of had like their group that they had friends in and that they spent time with and things like that. There was one family in particular who really reached out to me, and so that helped, but it was pretty lonely a lot of the time because there was no friends, there was no people to hang out with.
There was no relationship,
Exactly.
right? Yes, and that's what I want us to see that. Yes.
They're asking you guys to be louder.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
All right, so you guys have to speak up, like I do. Okay, so yeah. Oh, me too. Okay. All right,
That's
so
not even a problem for
that's
you.
not a problem. What I want us to really think about is this. Guys, relationship is key. As we have the new generation that comes through, the millennial generation, Generation Z, guys, if we want our church to grow, we have to have real relationships. Real relationships. Not this surface level, hi, how are you, how's your life, let's talk about sports, let's talk about the weather, I'll see you next week. That's not going to cut it. If that's all your church has to offer, people are going to leave because that's not what they want. And that's not real discipleship because you don't know somebody that way. Yes?
I think one of the main measures of a relationship is what happens when you disagree.
Oh, that's good. That's good right there. Yeah. I don't know, man, that is so powerful. Yeah. One of the main measures of relationship is what happens in that relationship when you disagree. Do you handle that in a godly, spiritual, Christ-like way? Does the relationship grow through that process? Or does it throw a kink in it? Does it separate? Do you go your own way? Yeah, absolutely.
And is that disagreement based on I think, I feel, or is it based on Scripture?
There you
because
go.
that's where the unity comes from.
There
So
you go.
I want to key on that real quick. So what we have seen from generation before me to generation of me and then after me is we have seen a different way of viewing religion. Okay, sorry. We have seen a different way of viewing religion between the generation before me and the generation after me. Before me, what you had is you had a very strong requirement towards religion. It was expected that you had a sense of religion, and it was honestly considered vogue for you to go to church and to have a religion for a lot of people, especially here in the Midwest. But what you see in the newer generations is you see something called sensationalism. Basically, what people want is they want a feeling. They want to feel something. And now, don't get me wrong, I don't think that's always a good thing, but it doesn't matter what I think, it matters what people are like. We have to understand how people are to connect with those people. So, what ends up happening, I'm studying through Daniel right now, and it's interesting because you talk about the Babylonian culture, and you have wise men, and you have these astrologers that studied the stars to tell the future, and to us that seems very silly, but look at the culture around you. Horoscopes are huge. They are increasing astronomically, to excuse the pun, but the whole idea is that people want to feel something, they want to see something, they want something that has sensation to it. That's why it's called sensationalism. And most people don't see that in the church. The idea of coming to a church, listening to a lesson, and then having a couple hi, how are yous in a church service is not what they're looking for. And now I'm not saying that we should just throw everything out and make it some fun time, a social event, because that's not what we should do either. But what I'm saying is that to understand what people need, we have to understand who people are.
That's it. And that's exactly right. You know, here's some things that I thought of when I was thinking about this. You know, I think we have kind of taken the mission of Jesus. Oh, you know, Luke 19, the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. We've taken the mission of Jesus, but we've divorced it from the method of Jesus. When Jesus went about changing the course of human history, he did it through discipleship. He did it through real one-on-one relationships, taking people and growing them deep in the Lord and deep in their relationship with God. That's what he did with that. And so we have that. We like the mission of Jesus. Oh, let's seek and save the lost. But we have kind of distanced ourselves from the method that Jesus used. And that's a problem. I mean, if God in the flesh did this as the way that he thought was most effective, I think it's kind of silly for us today to say we've got a better feel on it than Jesus did. And it's something that I think we really need to give some thought to.
They're still asking to move the mic closer. I'm sorry.
All right.
It's because we're spread out.
Well, y'all
Okay,
have to speak up.
I think it was closer last year.
All right. So here's something that I want us to think about. All right. We have kind of confused this process. All right. Let's think about it this way. In Matthew chapter 28, when Jesus gave the Great Commission, he said, "Go therefore and make confessors of me." Is that what he said? Yeah. Y'all need to get your Bibles out. Open up, right? You know, he didn't say make confessors. He didn't go say, "Hey, go make people to come sit in my building and listen to the preacher preach." He didn't say, you know, go make people who believe in me, as long as it doesn't have to affect their lives. He said, go make disciples. And remember from last week, we talked about the idea of discipleship is you give it all up to follow them, to conform your life into the life of the teacher. And that's something we really have to work on. And it's not something that we do very easy. And so the question that I think is every Christian needs to think about it, and this is something that I want us all to consider, is are we making Jesus' last words our first work? When he said, go make disciples, are we making his last words our first work? Or have we decided that church is more about us than it is about him? And I really want us to think about that, because I think that's something that really needs... We're talking about the need for discipleship, and I'll be honest, we don't have discipleship. And here's how I know this. How many congregations have you guys been a part of?
A lot.
Think about it, count them up.
I only remember 2.
Okay,
I'm
so
gonna
2
go
for
with
you.
2.
All right, that's
what
all
I
right.
remember.
4.
4,
7.
7. All right.
In the vicinity of 10.
Okay. All right. Yeah, somewhere around 7 to 10, somewhere in there. Okay. And all of those congregations that you have been a part of, all you guys, how many of those congregations actually had a plan to take people from newly baptized Christian to functioning disciple?
Occasionally there would be a class. But
Okay,
it would only
okay,
last-
yeah,
it would only last
yeah.
one semester.
We're going to have a 1-quarter class in 12 weeks. We're going to teach you how to be a disciple, even though it took Jesus 3 years. We're going to do it in 1 quarter, right? Because we got a class on discipleship.
Which I think that's one of those big things that kind of goes back to what we were discussing last class, where we were talking about the whole coaching, which is more of that team mindset, where so often we want to be like, okay, we want everybody to be disciples, so we're going to get this big class and we're going to do this, but it just doesn't work like that, because
Everybody
you're
in the
dividing,
big class takes somebody else. Then it's like,
but you're dividing your focus out to all these different people, and you can't do that because discipleship is so much about the close relationship.
Right.
It's a personal thing.
Yes.
And so having a huge class takes away that personal aspect to discipleship, and it just doesn't work out.
Right. Go.
Oh, I was just going to say, we talk to our kids a lot, especially this year, focusing on reading through the Old Testament in our family Bible study, about how it only takes one generation to fall away from the truth. And I think because of its personal nature, discipleship is the same way. When Paul worked with Timothy, what did he tell him? He said, okay, Timothy, I'm going to teach you, and then you teach other faithful men, and then those other faithful men are to teach other faithful men, because of the personal nature of discipleship. And we don't see it because it only takes one generation to lose that personal relationship.
That's exactly right.
I'll add to that
Go
too.
ahead.
Not even just one relationship of somebody falling away, one relationship of failing to teach discipleship.
Exactly.
That's it.
Because you can have a fully committed Christian not teach discipleship and the chain ends.
That's it. That's exactly right. And so I want you guys to think, somebody put it, I heard it put this way, and I really liked it. What we've done in the church, when it comes to spiritual growth, is we've provided a menu. Here's our discipleship class, here's our kids ministry class, here's our teen functions, here's our this and this and that. If you don't like what we have, we'll add something else in there. What do you want? And so we've kind of made this idea where church is a menu, where you go there and you say, I'll take this, I don't want none of that, because that makes me uncomfortable. I don't want that one. You can keep. It's kind of like if you take your kids out to eat and you say, which vegetable do I have to get a vegetable? That's kind of what we do spiritually. Do I have to eat my vegetables? Yes, you do. Yes. Yes, you do. And so what we've done is we've created a menu as far as the church is concerned instead of a map.
Well,
A map takes you from one place and shows you how to get to another. That's what we need in a church. Not pick and choose what you want and what's fun for you, but this is how we grow in Christ.
and then once again, I think with like you were with your menu analogy, I think that's another big thing. I heard it said that if you are having the same discussions over and over again and nothing is changing, then you're stuck. And I think the church today is stuck, because how often do we have discipleship classes and it's this exact same people going to that class who went to the last one?
Right?
Because these people are encouraging maybe the teacher, or maybe because they want to learn how to become a disciple, and they still haven't, despite the fact that there have been these discipleship classes. And I think, like we were saying with the menu thing, the thing about the menu is it doesn't change. It stays the same. You go there, there's still this stuff there. So many people get what they're comfortable with. Like, how many restaurants do you go to where you have that thing that you get? And so whenever you go to the restaurant, you're like, okay, I know what I'm getting, and you get
Right.
it.
That's
Or
exactly
when
right.
you go so often that the people there know you, and they're like your usual. It's the same thing in the church. So often we have the same classes, and everybody just goes to what they feel comfortable with because they've done it before.
Or the same teacher. Oh, I like the way they teach. I don't like that one over there. You know, same thing. Menu. We do it. We base it off of what we like. Good.
Well, and kind of building off of that, we don't try new things because we're afraid. Well, what if I don't like it? What if it doesn't taste good? I think a lot of the times we don't disciple because we're afraid. We're afraid of opening up to people. We're afraid of being real. We're afraid of not being perfect. We're afraid of getting things wrong. We're afraid of not knowing what we should know.
Mm-hmm.
And so we let that fear hold us back, when instead it could be a great growth opportunity. Because we're not going to know everything.
No.
I mean, there were several times whenever the apostles would meet up in the book of Acts to discuss things, because they're like, this is new. What are we going to do about this?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about it. We don't know right now. We're going to figure it out.
That's right. Yeah.
So
good.
if you have that person who's discipling you while you're discipling someone else, whenever they have something that you don't know, you talk to the person who's discipling you. And it goes on and so forth, so that you all communicate and still learn.
Yeah.
Madison Bearden just said we also look at the price. And I think that's a fantastic comment when we're talking about discipleship.
How much
because
is
I
it going
think
to cost?
that's something else that we have failed to do in the church is before we baptize someone into Christ, we don't teach them to count the cost.
That's right.
And then once they're a Christian and it gets hard and it's going to cost something, they're like, whoa, and they're not prepared for it.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Madison, great point. I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly right. We're not willing to pay the price. We look at our lives and we go, I might have to give up this or this or this, or I might have to give up this person. I might have to sacrifice this relationship, and I'm not willing. And so we don't do discipleship sometimes because of the price. I love that comment. That's a great thought.
Can I?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so another thing about like the menu analogy is when you go to a restaurant, your food is brought to you. So whatever you order off the menu is brought to you. But if you have a map as opposed to a menu, and if you're going to follow a map, you're getting up and you're going and you're doing that, and you're going to get something, going to accomplish something, as opposed to having whatever it is that you wanted served to you.
That's exact. And you're okay. I'm gonna build that up. I'm gonna flesh that out. Listen, that's what we do in the church, right? I don't need to do my Bible study. I just need to ask the preacher if I don't know what to believe. He'll tell me. He knows. I don't have to do this. I don't have to go visit the sick. That's the preacher's job. I don't have to teach the lost. We got somebody we pay for doing that. And you may not say those words, but unless your life reflects that you're doing those things, you're living those words. And people don't like to hear that, but that's the truth. We have the hired guns, and it's their job to do ministry. When the scripture plainly says, no. It's the job of and this is in Ephesians 4, go look it up because it's a great passage. It's wonderful, okay? The pastors and the teachers and the evangelists are to equip the saints for the work of ministry. So if you are a saint of God, you need to have and are expected to have by God a work of ministry. God has equipped you. He's given you specific gifts and abilities. And his expectation is you use those to bring honor and glory to him and to serve people and to teach people about Jesus.
I think it's important, gifts and abilities, so once you find something that you're good at, that doesn't mean you should stop trying to find other things.
That's right.
Or even work on something that you know you're not good at, because that's going to push you, that's going to help you learn something new that will benefit God, and it will be an encouragement to other people. Because it's like, well, if you're just not going to try, why should I?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's exactly right. I'm going to throw this out there real quick. If this is some new ideas for you, if this is new things that you haven't thought of, there's a book. It's called Growing True Disciples. I don't know, can you see that very well? I don't know if you can see it very well. But Growing True Disciples by George Barna, and New Strategies for Producing Genuine Followers of Christ. If this is some new ideas to you, grab this book and just read through it. Not saying it's a blueprint for you to follow, because that's not the purpose of this book. But the idea is for us to really pause and go, is my church actually making disciples, or are we making pew warmers? People that come and sit and go home and their life doesn't change. And so if you've never read that book, read through that book. It's a great book. It's a great starter resource for you.
So something kind of going back to what you were saying about it not being up to like the preacher to do all of this stuff. It's up to every person in the church. I came across this while I was doing some studying for this subject, and it was someone that said, he was a minister, and he said, I've spent so long in ministry and everybody expects me to do all of the work. Everybody looks up to me, and they look up to the elders. And yes, that's good. That's what we're here for you to look up to us. But they just expect us to, like, spoon feed them everything.
That's right.
When really, discipleship doesn't start with the preacher. It starts with the average person, the average Christian.
Yeah.
Everybody who's sitting there on a pew, they're disciples of Christ. And they're there to make disciples of Christ.
That's exactly right.
It sounds like Hebrews 5:12.
That's right. That's right.
Is that what you're going to say?
Okay, good.
When we were in Bear Valley in the ladies program, one of the things, and I don't remember which teacher said this, but they said you can't teach what you don't know, and you can't lead where you won't go. And I think that feeds into what Andrew's talking about. I've also heard it said, if we could go in and take out every bit of biblical knowledge that came from someone else, something that you heard in a Bible class, something that you heard in a sermon, something that you were told by your parents, if you took out all of the Bible knowledge that came from other people, what would be left?
That's
And
right.
that shows you where you're at.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm tell you what, if you've never thought about it like that, that's a challenge. What would happen if every bit of information you got from other people was taken away and all you had left was what you had studied in the Word? Where would you be? That'll show you some stuff.
And kind of going off of what Andrew said, I mean, we're told to help and bear each other's burdens, but if we're putting it all on, like, the preacher and the elders for all of our spiritual things, we're adding to their burdens. We are being a burden in and of ourselves. It's not up to everyone else to carry us.
Well, and here's the thing with that. And I'm yes and no at the same time. Because I believe that when somebody's a new Christian, it is the job of those who are more mature to walk along beside them and to feed them the milk of the Word. And to help them understand the changes they need to make and what this process is like. I believe that's our responsibility as Christians that are more mature. It's our job. That's part of discipling, is to walk along them. But at some point in time, I don't need to keep giving you milk. I need to progress you to some more solid food. And what that means is I need to teach you how to do this on your own.
We'll see.
Not just have to keep giving it to you and bringing it right to you and feeding it to you.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I guess it came out wrong what I was saying.
No, it was a great comment. That's what there should be a progression, and if it doesn't progress, then you're not really making disciples. If people aren't growing to the point where they can do it on their own, you're not making disciples. You're making consumers. Somebody that just wants to sit and have it all fed to them, brought to them, just the way they like it.
And one of the big things that I think one of the big problems with that is because everybody equates knowledge with maturity. And I think that's one of the big things.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks, oh, the more I tell you, the more mature you're going to be. But that's not really how that works.
No.
Your maturity level is not how much you know. It's how much you can study. It's how much you have grown or you can grow. It's your relationship. It's that growth. And so maturity, once again, I just think that's one of those places where the church has gotten stuck because they've gotten stuck into a certain viewpoint because that viewpoint is convenient. It's easy. You say, oh, maturity is knowledge, so you just tell everybody as much as you can, and then you say, okay, now they're mature.
Right.
When really, you need to be teaching them how to find this on their own if they're going to mature on their own.
Right. No, and that's exactly right.
Well, so I'll change the wording around a little bit there. We are so focused on building a knowledge base and not on building faith. What happens when all you know is from the teacher, from the people above you? Your faith is in those people and not in Christ. Your faith can only be in Christ when your actions follow through your own convictions.
That's
and now
right.
I'm not saying that you can't learn from other people. I have learned so much from other people, and I still will seek other people out to teach me and to train me and to show me things. But that's not who I trust in anymore. Once they teach me that stuff, I go and I look and say, okay, were they actually right? If they aren't right, then I know where I'm putting my faith. But if all I do is listen to them, my faith legitimately is in them.
Right.
I think that's one of the main problems that we have in the church throughout the years is we would have a generation who would want the knowledge of God, who would want that relationship, so they would study, they would learn, they would teach the next generation would know what they were taught, they'd teach the generation after that, and whenever they asked why, they said, that's how it is. They wouldn't have them learn how to go and find the answer, or even have a biblical reason for why that's the way that is done. It's just, that's why it is. So the next generation doesn't have faith, they fall away, it repeats.
Yeah.
What's the in conclusion, sort of? So often at the ends of classes or sermons or lessons or whatever, you have, so in conclusion, this, and then they tell you exactly what you're supposed to believe.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the big things where, in conclusion, I think, like I was taught at the preacher training camp, your in conclusion, that's summing up what you have told them. That's not saying, okay, so this is what we've looked over. In conclusion, you're going to believe this. That's saying, in conclusion, this is what we've seen. Now, how do we can we apply what we've seen?
That's right.
And then you go and see, so what do I believe now because of what I have learned?
Right. Now, application, faith grows when we live out the word. Not just how much we can stuff in our brains, but when we live it out in our lives, when we apply it to situations, when we apply it to our decisions, that's where our faith grows. I want to kind of hit the second part of this that I wanted us to talk about. We spent a lot of time on that. So, what are some of the barriers to discipleship? And I'm going to kind of kick this off a little bit by throwing something out there. And I want you guys to get your thoughts on this as well. Do we have a comment? Okay, no, okay, all right. So here's some of the barriers that I see. A lot of times we tell people and we teach people, we put a focus on what they're saved from and not what they're saved for. Okay? When we teach somebody the gospel, here's what we say. You don't want to go to hell, right? Nobody wants to go to hell. You don't want to go to hell. If you died tonight, where would you go? And so we're talking about teaching them about being saved from their sin. Now, don't mishear me, okay? People need to be saved from their sins. But that is only the beginning of a journey that's supposed to last for a lifetime. Not only are they saved from their sins, they're saved for the glorification of God, right? Ephesians chapter 2, right? We are his workmanship, created for good works that he has prepared before him, that we should walk in them, right? And so we need to start teaching people not just what they're saved from, but what they're saved for, because that's part of discipleship. It becomes less of a transaction with God. Oh, I believe in you, I put my faith in you, you cleanse me from my sins, I don't go to hell, yay, to a journey. God, I'm going to walk with you. I'm going to trust in you. I'm going to put my plans to the side, and I'm going to follow your path. And that's what we need to start teaching people. We need to put a focus from not just what they're saved from, but also on what they're saved for.
Well,
What do y'all think?
a lot of times, like, there'll be movie plots, and it's like the big twist is it's not the main character that's in danger, it's someone that they love, because they'll say love is a much more powerful motivator than fear. So going off of what you said, if we teach people what they're saved for, if we get them to love this amazing God, they're more likely to stick to it. They're more likely to have that faith and relationship in him than if it's just fear.
That's right.
Well, we talk a lot about the gifts of God, but we don't ever talk about that in an active sense. We talk about that in a static sense that, okay, we receive the gifts of God, but we don't ever talk about using the peace of God where, okay, I am in a hard situation and I have the peace of God because I trust in him, and I can use that to get me through this. We don't ever talk about it in a forward-looking sense. We always talk about it in a past tense.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yes.
I think that's an amazing thing about what we're seeing right now, though. In so many ways, I believe the fact that our church buildings are closed has been a tremendous blessing. Do you remember what that meme said? The church is not closed. The church has been deployed.
Yeah.
Yeah, because people, we're outside the building. We have to be outside the building, and you know, within the first few weeks of the time this happened, we almost broke Facebook because there were so many live streams and live feeds and things going on. Facebook couldn't handle it. And I think that's amazing because I believe that right now, in a way I have not seen in my lifetime, the church is rising up to give the world peace, to give the world hope, and to show that there's really only one place that those things are going to come from. And I think it's an amazing opportunity, and the church is rising to it right now.
Because
Yeah,
we're
I
not
agree.
comfortable with this.
That's-
Everything we talked about earlier, but this is a new situation and we don't know how to handle it, and this is the response because it's uncomfortable.
That's right. Hey, when you break us out of that comfort zone, we grow, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
Imagine that.
I think being comfortable or not wanting to be uncomfortable is kind of one of the biggest barriers to discipleship, because it was kind of like earlier, you know, we don't want to be real with people. We don't want to admit whenever we're struggling. We don't want to admit whenever we're wrong or things like that, because especially in American society, that's very frowned upon. It's looked down on as weakness and like something's wrong with you whenever that happens. But we need to have people that we can open up to and be real with about that. Otherwise, we're never going to be able to work on it.
Yeah, you're right. Let's see. I've got. Okay. So building off of that, I've got one more thing I want to kind of put out there, and then we'll kind of slow this down. I've got a few more things that I want to talk about as far as barriers to discipleship. So we'll probably catch that next week, because there's some really good things we need to talk about. But you know, one of the things that kind of has summing all this up and bringing it all together in some responses is this.
In conclusion.
I think one of the biggest barriers that we've kind of talked about around, but we haven't stated, is this. A lot of times we're not willing to put in the work and the dedication it takes to do discipleship.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. It's not an easy thing. It requires effort. It requires involvement. It requires openness and transparency.
Vulnerability.
Vulnerability. We're going to talk more about that next week, because I've got some stuff. But you know, here's what I've noticed that we've done in the church. We win people with convenience. I don't know if you've ever thought about it like this, but we teach people, hey, this is what you have to do to be saved. And that's what we tell them, and that's what we tell them, and that's what we tell them. And when all we're talking about is the idea of what is the least amount of things that you have to do to get to heaven, and that's what we reduce our message down to, and we win them with that message of convenience, then we wonder why they don't want to commit to anything more than that. Well, I think that's because that's the bill of goods we sold them. We sold them the message of, hey, this is all you have to do, and that's what they buy.
Well,
Okay?
I was at work the other day, and a coworker of mine said something jokingly. He said, "When was really the last time you ever gave 100%?" And one of the other girls there was like, "What? Every time I'm at work," and she was shocked. I think we should have that reaction in the church.
Oh, yeah.
When was the last time you ever gave 100%? I mean, like you were saying, you do the bare minimum to get to heaven. When was the last time you gave 100%? When was the last time you were like, okay, this is all I have to do, but I'm going to go do this because I can.
Right.
Because I should.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I mean, think about it this way. What did Jesus, and we'll kind of close it with this thought, but what did Jesus require of his disciples?
Everything.
That's right. Everything.
Luke
Leave it
14,
all
27.
them. Yeah.
Whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Luke 9:23. And he said to all, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me.
That's right. And that's what I think we need to think about a lot. Guys, discipleship, one of the biggest barriers is sometimes we're not willing to really pay the price. We're not willing to count the cost. And when we do, we go, that price is too high for me. You know, there's several people, as you read through the Gospels, there's several people that wanted to put other things ahead of their discipleship with Jesus. And he said, no, you have to choose. Am I going to be first or not? And the choice is ours. I just sometimes think that we make a choice based on what we want for ourselves, rather than being willing to commit and pay the cost that it's going to take to truly follow and be a disciple of Jesus. I hope that you have gotten this.
Cindy asked you to repeat the name of the book.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Cindy. The name this book. This is just a starter book. Like I said, this is not anything. I've got some others that I would recommend that we can talk about later. But this book is called "Growing True Disciples: New Strategies for Producing Genuine Followers of Christ." It's by George Barna. That's just something to kind of open your mind and let you think about this. If you don't know much about the Barna Research Group, they do a lot of good statistics and studying and surveys. It gives you some good insight into where our culture is at. But I just want to challenge you, guys. If you're listening to this, and I want to challenge you guys specifically, let's be disciples. Let's not come and play church. Let's not warm a pew. But let's be the people that God calls us to be. I want you to be the people that God has called you to be.